We ran it, but we had no idea. The teachers were the ones teaching us.
Such a slick operation we have here. Okay, it's 2 minutes past. Thanks for your patience. I'm just going to share my screen. I am. Share screen. Lovely. Okay. Can everybody see the first slide? Yes, I'm seeing nods. Okay. So thanks so much for joining me. There are 3 sessions within this core professional development, and I do have 2 sessions for each of these. They can be taken in any order. I'm also recording them, so you can pop in afterwards and hear the discussion. Then we'll link you up with a quiz, and you can just follow up and close off the professional development. Now, because it is still a small group, I might get you to unmute your mics unless you're shuffling around and making a bit of noise, just so that you can just sort of jump in. This is the collective wisdom of VET practitioners for this. And without any further ado, I'll just quickly go over what we have gone over in the last session, but it's very important to understand the frameworks that we work within when we deliver professional development to you as VET practitioners. So we are trying to meet the teaching and learning objectives, which is the TPAC model, which I'll go over. The VET Practitioner Framework, where I sent you a link so you can understand where you're placed in terms of being a VET practitioner. And most importantly, to meet the RTO standards for continuing registration 2015. So the TPAC model is a model that I've been working within for quite a period of time, and it's trying to capture professional development that will land you in the sweet spot in the middle here. So a lot of you all of you have excellent content knowledge, and you also breathe life into the content through your industry experience. You also have been teaching for a period of time, so bringing that deep knowledge about the processes and practices and methods of teaching and learning. The third aspect of knowledge is the technological knowledge, and this was introduced fairly recently to talk about the technology when teaching students in the classroom, blended delivery and purely online, even self-paced delivery. So understanding the kind of technology that you bring into play when it applies best to the resources and the context of your delivery. And landing in the middle is quite a feat, because when you come from industry, you're a practitioner, you have a lot of knowledge, you come in and you join a completely new vocation, which is teaching. And then the third is actually bringing in meaningful learning design and use of technology. And we're going to go a little bit into that today. And the VET Practitioner Framework really talks to this as well. So as a VET practitioner, there are a lot of capabilities that you are meeting, and at different levels throughout your career. So this is a framework for you to self-assess, and I've sent you the link so you can get an idea of where you sit as a VET practitioner. You can also review peers. And most of all, we wish to have course coordinators to evaluate your performance in the VET field of teaching and learning in line with the EDU levels, which is very important when educators are mentoring other staff. That really, brings it alive. And also as some of you are doing in the online refresh. So Roxy's just asking, is this the same PD session as last Friday? No, I'm just going over the framework that the others have already gone through in the last session. I just wanted to place it in the right context. So if you go through that, when you get to the IPSA site, I won't actually go through it. You're actually selecting a level and a rating for all the different capabilities. Once you've finished that, if you can send it to myself and also yourself so that you can actually see where you're placed and at what level. Okay, we're also meeting the regulatory standards, and as I was saying in the last session, we're focusing on standards 1 and 2. So standard 1 is responsive to industry and learner needs, and standard 2 is quality assurance. But tonight we are focusing only on standard 1, so that you get a feel and you can share with me your experience of engaging delivery to learner needs, and also the industry context around that. So let's begin. So standard 1, being responsive to industry and learner needs. The training and assessment strategy and practices are responsive to industry and learner needs and meet the requirements of training packages and VET accredited courses. So, Denny,
yes.
Are we delivering training packages or VET accredited courses?
Oh, both.
It's a trick question. No, it's not. It's not. Any idea? Whoop.
VET accredited courses.
Well, actually, we're delivering training packages. So some RTOs actually accredit their own courses, and it's more rare these days because training packages are so expansive.
Yeah.
But I was just saying today that when I did start teaching, we were all teaching out of VET accredited courses, and then training packages did become a standard. And also that the training and assessment practices are responsive to industry and learner needs. So we explain that to third parties through our training and assessment strategy. And that tells anybody outside of our organisation what strategies we put in place to inform our curriculum design through industry consultation. What is our continuous improvement process? What kind of quality educators are we utilising, and how do we maintain currency and professional development like this? So this is where we get into the interactive part of the session, because this is your understanding of your student cohort. So Anne-Marie, can you describe one typical characteristic of the students entering our programs?
Most of them are over the age of 18. They have had previous training experience, so maybe a lower level qualification in a set 3 or 4, and that they've built on that and have a specific interest in either continuing into higher ed, like a bachelor, or plan on kickstarting their career off their diploma.
Okay, and Roxy, anything else that would just sort of describe our typical student? Because our student cohorts would say differ to students entering the creative media industry or other industries.
I think what we do have, which is probably unique to ACAP, is a wide diversity of students. So we can get people entering into a second career path, as well as people straight out of high school, all interested in interpersonal dynamics and relationships and counselling. So, and I think they're all drawn to it either from personal history and experience or a desire to really move into the health sector and be helpful in that way. So, you know, I've had students from 18 to 70 in the same class and all with different technological understanding. So, you know, some of them have never even had an email address, and the others are, you know, as up with technology as you can get. So they're very different types of learners that can come into the class space, and having to accommodate all those needs is quite challenging at times.
And what would you say online versus on campus when in that regard?
I think it's the same actually, because based on who I get in Zoom sessions and that sort of thing, I would say that diversity is across all sectors.
Denny, any kind of characteristics that you would consider, say, the lowest common denominator that makes
low? Yeah. People from other cultural backgrounds that have had experiences as migrants, refugees, and are interested in working in the sector.
Is that typical?
No, it's not typical, but I've had a few students of, you know, that, and they probably would find it the most difficult learning. You will have to put a lot of additional effort into working with students such as that. And I suppose there is always the person who wants to move from perhaps the service industry, whether they've been in hairdressing or hospitality, etc., and feel that they work very well with people, but don't really have a good understanding of what they're getting themselves into.
Okay, and Simon, any commonalities of the student cohort that you would personify?
I wanted to build on what Denny just said, actually, because I think there is something here that's worth thinking about. That I think 99% of the students that I've come across have halted their education prior to a tertiary level. And whatever their background is, some people might not have necessarily completed high school. And what Denny has just mentioned was something I wanted to hit upon, was I think a lack of understanding of what the requirements are, what the expectations are for them to perform in these courses, and a lack of understanding about how to do things like structure writing and how to present things. So this common element is that their engagement with prior education hasn't necessarily prepared everyone to the same level that they need to achieve at when they come in here. So there's an element there that we need to meet and match.
Yep. Elisa, would you like to contribute?
I would just say that the students entering the program, many of the ones I work with are school leavers, and their learning is very different, structured very different from high school, and they struggle a lot with the way that our programs are put together and how they have to be self-paced learners in some respects, and learning those skills which they seem to not have learnt in high school, moving forward into this sort of arena.
Yep. That actually brings up a very interesting aspect about the student cohort. We have to understand who's coming into our programs and find the typical characteristics that would inform the way we facilitate, or understand actually the challenges. So one thing that what has been said by everybody is we're actually bringing them into a very different type of facilitation. So we are doing VET competencies, which means we have to get students across the idea of it's workplace training, so it's either competent or not yet competent. It's also, as I've written here, quite a lot of disaffected learners coming from secondary schooling because that they've been learning with really poor assessment tools and rote learning, which is not contextual. And so we are actually, whilst we have to engage the learners at a number of different levels, we have to understand that we are using the best tools that will actually convey workplace training. So you've already mentioned generational. So it sounds like we've got a very diverse student cohort, and we wouldn't, even though we've got statistics of the median average student, which is sort of female over 30, that, you know, is coming in with a reasonable amount of life experience, we can't undermine any of the other characteristics of the student cohort, such as their study approach. And that's why I was asking Roxy, you know, the online students, are they different to the on-campus? And also, are they coming in, as Elise has mentioned, are they challenged with foundation skills, such as literacy, language and numeracy? Not that numeracy plays a big part. So we've got to understand also there are different motivation factors, as Simon was saying, you know, sort of coming in. Anne-Marie was also talking about they may be looking towards further study. They may actually be looking towards hitting the ground running in the industry. I've also heard, since I came to ACAP, we're dealing with the wounded healers. So we have people with challenging life histories. And one of my first exercises, and it could have been in your class, Roxy, in Brisbane, where we had the interview exchange. And, you know, one of the students said, I want to be the person I met in rehab that helped me. And so, you know, that they have a very broad range of experiences coming into the course. So
yes, I often hear, I want to be the person that I didn't have.
yes, that too, for sure. And what is wonderful and so exciting for me to come into this discipline area is that this education is making a huge difference to the individuals themselves, to their communities, and beyond, their families, their friends. So, you know, this can be quite a challenging prospect, as some of you have shared with me. So when we're understanding the learner, one of the factors that was probably a turning point for me in delivery and facilitation and curriculum design is understanding surface learners versus deep learners. So we can safely say, especially an online student such as myself, that people are time-starved. Being a surface learner is not necessarily a negative thing, but people will go to the end to sort of see what is the quickest pathway from where they're at to completing assessments, for example. So a surface learner will be motivated by the task requirements. A deep learner, how would you describe a deep learner, Simon?
Somebody who is able to understand the meta learning, should we say? Somebody who picks up on the underlying concepts that are being discussed at a given point, not just understanding maybe the case study, but being able to recognise the moral behind the message, for example.
Yes, exactly. So they'll actually take a deep dive And quite often, surface learners can become deep learners out of necessity, but our skills as curriculum designers, continuous improvement about programs and facilitators means that we have the opportunity across a diverse student cohort through good design and facilitation to get them to take a deep dive and explore that concept by linking it directly to the task requirements. So, still haven't figured out how to use this. We also need to, we don't have in VET curriculum that I've been involved with, we should never park the foundation skills on the side. And you'll notice that the units of competency have the foundation skills built into them. So you can actually see the performance criteria, how they're linked, and at what level the students need to be brought up to do the training. So the strategies of educators to ensure learner engagement and achievement of the learning outcomes is a requirement of being able to address any of the academic skills, teach students how to unpack an assessment, but most importantly, you and myself as VET educators is to be able to give industry context, because that is one way of getting surface learners to take a deep dive, because all of a sudden you're telling a student about in the industry to be able to do X, Y, and Z is paramount importance, so that students can actually pin their learning on a workplace scenario. So, when we think about engaging delivery, so we've already talked about the student cohort, the diversity of learners, and also learners' approaches, life experience, a generational difference, and so forth. What are the elements of engaging delivery to actually, if I just go back a slide, if I know how to do that, work it, no, oh no, previous, very mechanical. So strategies and skills to ensure learner engagement and achievement of learning outcomes, create support a learner interrelationships, uses a range of technologies effectively. So I'm just going to go through the whole group, and I'm going to start with Miss Anonymous at the bottom. Elisa, what would you say is one element of engaging delivery that you found?
I would say building a rapport with the student,
Yes.
to begin with.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
probably one of the elements, definitely. Learning about what the student, why the student's there, what's their drive. In behind why I look like anonymous. I'm a silhouette.
No, you look very anonymous. No, that is great. Building a rapport and understanding their extrinsic or intrinsic motivation for doing the course. Brilliant. Simon, one element of engaging delivery that you've discovered along the way.
Speaking to the students as people and not lecturing them, and actually engaging them in making the understanding of learning themselves by them telling their own stories within a context that you're able to frame for them.
Excellent. So we're nailing them, because that's interpersonal relationships. It's also the meddler in the middle as opposed to the guru on the stage, or the guide on the side as opposed to the guru on the stage. Denny.
Meddler on the middle, is that illegal?
Well, according to some sources.
I think a sense of connection.
Yes.
That I do a lot of, I suppose, creating scenarios which are probably, you know, my experience, work experience, life experience, etc., so that they can connect with some of the topics and the concepts. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So you've actually talked to one need that we discovered in the design thinking process, which was students need to feel connected, supported and engaged. Brilliant. Anne-Marie, one element of engaging delivery.
Recognising that students are experts at their own learning and that they understand, you know, their inbuilt learning. Sorry, I've had a long day at work and I'm just having a total mental block. Yeah, that most students recognise how they best learn, and that if you engage them and ask them, they're actually quite capable of telling you what they need to be able to learn effectively.
Fantastic. No, I love it. Leanne, I just hope I've written them all down on the next slide.
I think a good idea is to be responsive to their needs too, and to be quick to respond when they have a question, so they're not sitting there balking about it, particularly around assessments when they come up to their first written one, if they've done all online quizzes, which my groups do, and they find it really hard then to struggle into the written word. So supporting them through that process, so that they know you're there and you're just a phone call away or an email away to get back to them.
Brilliant. I love it. Roxy.
I think the thing I get a lot of feedback from students on is assisted experiential learning. So actually creating a scenario where they can actually put into practice their skills with a really supportive, safe environment, which is non-judgmental and really encouraging, so they can actually get a sense that they can do it for themselves. So I think those sorts of spaces where they can practice those skills online or in classes are really important.
Yeah, great. And do you know what I'm hearing, even though I know you're across both face-to-face and online, is I'm hearing the same stuff. You're talking about your online experience for students, and this is amazing. Susie, I'm going to grab you for one more. You're on mute, I think, Susie.
Was that me? Did you say?
No, Susie.
I'm sorry.
No, you're not on mute, but we can't hear you. Oh.
Are you talking to me?
Martha can answer.
Susie. Susie, do you want to put something in the chat room to join?
Mark, you're quiet.
Susie tap dances and sings a tune. Totally engaging. Hey, Susie does it all with the mute button. Visual representation, that's what it's about. Well, while we wait for Susie.
Delivery, yes, Susie.
Ah, there you go. I told you, tap dance and singing.
Yeah, no, brilliant. And who I haven't asked is a face-to-face educator that just wants to pipe in with one more. Oh, Susie, you just said it. Two. Wonderful.
Can I give you a couple here?
Yeah.
Look, I really love two things that I always use. So someone talked about rapport before. Part of that rapport building, I really like to know where people are working at, where they're doing their placement, what is their background. And then I will link what is going on. So when I'm talking about parts of what I'm delivering, I'll link that to their actual role. And so they have aha moments. It's one of my favourite things, which I think is a personal hook. The other thing I absolutely love, Kristen, I'm a storyteller. And so normally I'll talk about scenarios that go on in the field and link that to the teaching so people can see or understand how that works in practice. And I think people really cotton onto that is a really good thing. And then you can add to scenarios as you go. But I think that storytelling is an art.
Yes.
And when you can link it to the learning, people really jump onto that. And it really helps them, I think, to lock in information.
Actually, you guys have come up with well beyond what I normally, follow up with. So what you, have I missed a page? Previous? I think I've lost a page. But what you're actually talking about is, yes, I have deleted a page. So what you've been talking about is storytelling, a breakdown of activities, which is crucial, in charge of their own learning, support, interrelationship. You said so many things that I wish I'd written them down, because I normally bring it up on the next slide. But what I've never heard of, to the extent that I've just heard, is that when we're talking about engaging delivery and we're mixing up activities and we're using different technologies and processes, that this isn't differentiated between online, blended and face-to-face. So the resources and the breakdown of activities, because when we understand it, even as adults, we have a very short concentration span. So if we don't follow a cycle of theory, demo, practical, review, reflection, we're going to lose our audience. If you're a face-to-face educator, you can just about guarantee any adult, after 3 minutes of delivery, you have lost them. It becomes white noise, unless you're actually bringing in an activity like a discussion, or like we're doing here now, is that we're actually collaborating on an understanding of what engaging delivery is. So what I always think about is the learning cycle. And this can start and finish at any point, and it can be rotated throughout a session multiple times, or it can actually be rotated once, or it can start at a different point in the following session. So the first is, like a small amount of theory. So we deliver content, we demonstrate it somehow, or we talk about it, or we give a workplace scenario. The practical is the activities where they do, and they try it out, they reflect, and then they can go back to theory. And one of the aspects of the learning design that we're working on in the online space is that learning design is crucial to actually give a narrative, as Mark was saying, to the story. You give a context up front. You say, how does this relate to the industry? Then you dive down. You say, at the end of this session, you will be able to do X, Y, and Z. These are the requirements, and this is the linkage to the assessments. And we have to be very succinct, because if we just keep delivering just-in-case knowledge, not only are we going to lose our audience, but it's actually not going to be absorbed by the learner. So, one thing that I like to think about, when you're session planning or you're doing online learning design, is the gloss at the beginning of any session or a topic. So gain the learner's attention, interest and involvement. So, that is where a lot of us will give context. Okay, today we're going to learn about a very important part of being a case manager. We're going to link the learning to the learner's previous experience, and quite often that's sort of throwing it out to the students. I never actually deliver per se. It's just a series of questions that I go around every single student, and that's how I learn their names. But most importantly, I know that every student's going to get the same experience. The outcomes or the objectives of the session are identified, the structure of the session is previewed, and stimulate the learner's motivation. So we've got all the ingredients to get a student to begin that session. And I don't know about you guys, but when I come into a classroom, I get very nervous when an educator doesn't seem to have a really good plan as to how it's going to go. And more so, I get very antsy if one student is dominating the experience
Mm.
of the class. And that means that it's not actually collaborative learning. It's not creating a community of learning. It's actually just pitching to that, student at the front that's got their hand up or is happy to let everybody know how much they know about nothing. So the middle section of a session is the breakdown of the activity. So this is where we sort of talk about a range of technologies and facilitation techniques. So when we talk about technology, it's really important that a prime example is in the online space, we don't turn on all the bells and whistles and press all the buttons to find out, what engages students. And we found that through the online refresh is that if we have a good constraint and we actually start to selectively use those technologies, we are able to lay e-moderation on top of Gilly Salmon's model, which, almost gamification on top of Gilly Salmon's model, where when a student's being oriented into the space, we don't fly over and we do masses of interaction through technology. We just get them to have a feel of the space. But to go over to you guys, what are other examples of good use of technology in the face-to-face, blended or online? And I'm going to tackle those that have... Gay, do you want to just talk about any technologies that you've done useful?
I used to actually find the chat sessions for online learning, the chat sessions useful because the students could just ask whatever question they may have or make comments about the content.
I'm having trouble hearing you, Gay.
Oh, sorry. Can you? Oh, sorry.
That's all right. No, I caught a bit of it.
I haven't got the headphones. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, sorry. I usually have headphones and I haven't got them, so my apology.
No, that's all right.
Yeah. What I was saying is that I actually find the chat sessions useful because they can be brief and not as intensive as, for instance, as Zoom. I mean, Zoom's very useful too, particularly for role play. But yeah, I have found when students have used the chat sessions that a lot can be covered very quickly, or they can ask questions that they may have without taking up a lot of their time.
Is that a chat session you're saying?
Yes, chat, C-H-A-T.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Good.
But I haven't made the best use of them this term, so I've got to look at, I'm looking at how that comes through.
Yep. Fantastic. Eunice, any thoughts?
Not dislike, no. No, I like the idea of having short videos just to give them some idea about what we're learning. And another one. The other one is to do with asking about their own experience and getting, so that's what it is, exercises, not quizzes, but small exercises just to get them to reflect on the learning, on the content. So yeah, videos I really like, short ones though, not long ones.
Yeah.
And exercises that get them engaged. Make it and fun exercises too, not the boring ones, so that they can do a bit of theory, but then they wake up a bit again by doing this exercise.
Yep. Violetta.
I would probably suggest two things. Like the first thing that I would probably suggest is using, I mean, I know you just mentioned videos, but using like different, like YouTube videos or, like as in even TED Talks. and things like that. And also using like a doodle poll, for example, just to get more information in the sense of, if you're trying to ask them something, so what works and what doesn't. So, yeah.
Yeah. And what we really found is that, like it's been mentioned twice, is short video content is hugely beneficial to students, as long as it's not just a passive exercise. So watching and then responding, or watching that and then trying a part of the assessment, and so forth. So yeah, absolutely. Roxy, any other technologies? Well, you're the technology queen. It's about 6.
One of the things that I find, and you're going to shoot me for saying it, but puppets I find, or anything where it's childlike and playful, that gets over the anxiety that learners experience, particularly in this field, because it can be quite confronting or challenging for many, particularly we don't know what their histories are coming into the classroom often. And so I find engaging them in something that is non-threatening and making it safe for them to practice their skills, but in a way that is playful and very creative, I find works incredibly well.
Yep. Does anybody else want to pipe in through their experience of face-to-face?
I'd like to know more about the puppets, Roxanne.
Well, I use the puppets as mock clients or mock counsellors. So when a student freezes and, you're putting them into a role play situation, they just freeze on the spot and go, I don't know what to do, and they start to panic. I get them as a puppet, so a puppet on the hand, or I put even on Zoom sessions in the online space, I'll put a puppet on the hand so they can't see me, they can only see the puppet. And I put it in the context of the puppet. So if it's a wombat, I'm talking about, it's been a hard day digging holes and all that stuff. And the laughter and just breaks down all of those social barriers, and they just get into it. And being able to bring joy and laughter and comedy into the class space, I think just levels a lot of the anxieties that otherwise would get in the way of the learning.
Nice. Kristen, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, awesome. I got my speakers working. Kristen, I just want to add, in terms of face-to-face, I love that puppet idea as well, but in terms of face-to-face, I find that a lot of students these days bring along their own technology, whether it be iPads or laptops or phones. So I utilise those for them to do individual or group research, like in short snippets, where they then have to break down the information that they've researched and bring that back to the class. So it might be a 20-minute research activity that they can do with their own technology, or on campus there's computers that they can access as well. And that, I find that good, because they can go to maybe different parts of the college, out into the open areas, and it just breaks up that 4 hours of class.
Yeah. And I think
it works really well with either in pairs or a group of 3.
Yeah.
That they can, work together with.
Yeah.
And not alone.
Yes. And also I found when I started using Socrative quizzes in the classroom, students were so entertained because we had a live data board, and students are just on their phones and they're checking their knowledge, and it's a non-threatening sort of environment. It's checking their understanding of concepts or so forth, and utilising those sort of technologies means that people can just pick it up, and everybody's got a phone pretty much. I really like those techniques. And also, if we think about the breakdown of activities, and it still goes to the online environment, but if we ever have, say, for example, 10 minutes of theory, that is quite interactive, we should be following it up with 20 minutes of skill building. So if we use that philosophy, we're always on our own cases about what is the linkage to the assessment? That is the biggest driver of motivation. And because we have very rigorous training packages that are very demanding in the performance evidence, is that we don't have time not for the assessments to drive the learning. And so what we're really talking about, and this is coming through on your work in the online space, in the continuous improvement, is that we're chunking it all down. You have quick wins for students to be able to chunk down that assessment and bring it into the classroom, the online synchronous sessions, the activities, so that students can actually do a really strong linkage to progress. So they always get a very clear concept of their progress through the assessments. So the only other thing, and I just realised we have actually gone a little bit over time, is we finish off the session, you know, to recap that the outcomes or objectives are reviewed in some form. Feedback to individuals in the group is given to provide encouragement and motivate for future learning. And this is one of the main drivers I've found in the online environment. If you're doing good blended delivery or purely online, because some of our students, even though we do have blended delivery and we have the option of synchronous, some students still choose almost like a self-paced program, is that you've got to bring the activities of the other students into the synchronous sessions or in your feedback to sort of say, to create a really good community of learning, because we're not going to drive online engagement. We're going to enable students to drive the online engagement with others. So when you're in class, it's always good to reflect on any activities that have happened in the online space, or when you are posting to the forum, that you're actually relating everything that is happening in the student environment. And that's what I think you guys were alluding to before, and I've never heard it so strongly, is creating that community, feeling supported, being, as Anne-Marie said, honouring their ability to learn, you know, their capacity to learn and teach as well. And most importantly, the last section is the future outcomes. So the students are looking forward to, you know, what is coming next and so forth. So the blended delivery, the online facilitation, the face-to-face, they're all task-driven activities that enable things like a flipped classroom model to actually happen. So anything pre-work, pre-workshop, you know, that we close off activities so that students don't think it's such a monumental take that you always frame, spend 5 minutes doing this, do 15 minutes before you go into the next session. And what we're actually doing a lot in the online is indicating this video takes 3 minutes. Engage with people so that they actually can see some kind of progress. And that is the session in a nutshell. Now, you actually covered almost 3 levels of facilitation just by talking about exactly how you work in the space, you know, online, face-to-face and blended. And what's important to understand is that in VET, at ACAP, the kind of things that we're covering off here are actually going to take us into the next phase, because as I've said to you guys before, is, you know, we have been halted by low enrolment numbers, and we've put in a lot of energy into 3 facets of learning and teaching, you know, the online refresh, good blended delivery, student success, making students feel supported, and what Elisa does with her team is actually helping adult learners through helping students to unpack assessment tasks and so forth. So just to finish off this session, I just wanted to say that where we're going now is we're actually going to start declustering our subjects and actually delivering short programs as per our needs. And so all of this stuff that helps you work within our framework, it also helps you to work outside of ACAP or outside of the VET process, so that you're actually building capability to be much more versatile within education.